Welcome back to another episode of the Tennis Doctors, where three physicians talk about the world of men's professional tennis on the ATP Tour. Joining me, as always, Dr. Bilal Ahmed
Hey, good to be back.
and Dr. Arjun Watani.
Hey everyone, good to be back.
I'm Jay Schreither. And so we're going to do another rewind. We're going to aim for about 20, 25 minutes. We're going to do another rewind. So what we do in these, we look back at classic matches that are going to have some relevance for upcoming tournaments. We're kind of in a lull period here between Wimbledon and US Open 2022. And so last time we looked back at Federer Djokovic US Open Final 2007. Now we're going to transition to something a lot more recent. So we're going to talk about the 2019 final of the US Open between Rafa Nadal and Daniil Medvedev. Why something so recent? I'll get to the crunch, I guess the kind of the crux point later. But I mean, I think you have to start with the fact these are the two favorites for this year's U.S. Open, assuming they're healthy and they're playing. And it is a matchup that we may see in the final again. And so it's interesting to kind of look back and look at the dynamics of this match because it's a very interesting matchup stylistically. Again, let's set the stage before we talk about the match. So this match was towards the end of 2019. That was a breakout year for Daniil Medvedev. On his side, he had a fourth round loss to Novak Djokovic in the first hardcourt slam of the year, but he really took off post Wimbledon, reached the final in Washington, lost to Nick Kyrgios, reached the final in Canada, lost to Nadal in a match that doesn't really have much relevance here. I mean, it was pretty non-competitive, but I think a lot of guys struggle when they play Rafa Nadal the first time. And I think Medvedev didn't really have any answers in that match. Then goes to Cincinnati, beats Djokovic in the semis, and goes on to win his first Masters title, and then gets to the U.S. Open. I don't think he was viewed as a favorite, but he was viewed as a contender given his track record over the summer. But he and Nadal end up in this collision course. As for Nadal, 2019, you can argue actually in terms of slams is his most productive year in terms of consistency across the slams. Reached the final in Australia, lost to Djokovic in straights coming off injury, won the French Open beating Dominic Thiem, semis at Wimbledon losing to Federer, and then here gets to the final at the U.S. Open, defeating Medvedev. How did they get there? Again, setting the stage. Remember, Novak Djokovic is going to lose early in this event. He's going to retire versus Stan Wawrinka. And I think that really opened things up. But I think it also put some pressure on Nadal. If you notice, and I noticed the trend during this tournament, he really started to have some tight moments in his draw once Djokovic was gone. And Djokovic, that loss was in the fourth round of Wawrinka. If you look at how things broke out for Nadal, he had a pretty easy road. He had a very epic sort of win against Marin Cilic in the fourth round in 4 sets. But then Diego Schwartzman, even though it was a straight set match, pretty physical match at night. Matteo Berrettini, another straight sets match, a little bit nervy, again, 1 in 3 sets, Berrettini's first semis, and then gets to the final. As for Medvedev, he really benefited from Djokovic being gone. Djokovic would have been his quarterfinal opponent. He was sort of cruising to that point. He beat Wawrinka in a 4-set match. Again, got a little bit of luck, quote unquote. Dimitrov beat Federer in the quarters. So he avoided Djokovic, avoided Federer. And sometimes that's what you need. And we can talk about that a little bit relevant to guys like Alcaraz and Sinner. Sometimes you need things to kind of open up a little bit for you to make it to your first major final. So setting the stage, Nadal wins this match in 5 sets, takes the first 2 sets, loses sets 3 and 4, and wins the 5th finally, serving it out. But we can talk about the match play, things like that, Bilal, but this podcast isn't about that because there's plenty of news reports people can read about the match and who broke when and things like that. But let's talk about it in context of game styles, right?
Yeah.
So my first question for you, which is kind of a leading question, I'm curious. Do you enjoy this matchup? So when you watch this, like this is an odd matchup. This is not true, quote unquote, modern tennis and what most matches are like. It's a little bit different and quirky in terms of how the matchup plays out. We'll talk about that in a second. You can get into that. Do you enjoy this or do you find it boring? Like what do you think of sort of the back and forth these guys have? Because they have very kind of these patterns that repeat themselves. And it's a little very different than I think than any other matchup on tour.
I love this matchup, to be honest with you. I feel like these two guys have a very similar style of play, even though Medvedev is very unorthodox. Nadal is also unorthodox in his own respective right, too. And I feel like both these guys like to hang back. They like to find their rhythm. They like the other guy to kind of, they both are grinders to an extent where they can outlast their opponents. Obviously, physicality-wise, Medvedev does not look super imposing, but he can outlast most players on the tour. And I think he kind of showed that even against Nadal, that he could push Nadal to an extent in the 5th set where Nadal felt a little bit gassed. So I do like it. I think it's a little bit cat and mouse kind of style to play between these two. I felt like the variety Nadal had to pull out in the match was just a sign of that as well. And I felt like it was very tactical, and it continues to be very tactical between these guys, even in the subsequent matches at the Australian Open and so forth. So I do enjoy it. So I like to see more of them in the future.
Arjun, it's funny. Bilal said cat and mouse because I wrote notes when I was watching the match. It's the very first thing I wrote down because they played a lot of cat and mouse points even early in this match. Do you enjoy this, or do you think is this your preference for your style? Like, is this the type of match you enjoy watching?
Yeah, so I guess retrospectively, looking at this in the back, I think it's actually a good match to watch and rewatch because it shows two people who are very similar stylistically. It almost feels like kind of now with current players knocking on the doors of current champions, and it really gave me the feel that Medvedev, yeah, he got an easy route to the finals. Well, not easy, but he had the opportunity in front of him, which he capitalized on. But it was kind of it kind of reminds me of Djokovic in that match we reviewed in 2007, knocking on Federer's door, or Berrettini currently knocking on Djokovic's reign on grass, or Alcaraz winning Masters right this year. We can kind of see potential future champions, and with Medvedev getting to the finals here, winning a few Masters that year, and then following it up with a strong Australian Open showing, and then the following year in 2021 winning the US Open again, or for the first time. It looking back, it makes you think that these are kind of those highlight moments of one's career, getting lucky with the draw, but it also shows that once you get to the finals, you get that confidence and that ability that you can get to that finals again. And after a couple of them, you have that chance to win them. So I think in the grand scheme of tennis as a whole sport, this was one of those moments where someone was knocking on a legend's door, and you see that in today's game. I thought it was boring though in some aspects though, because they're both in a way counterpunchers. Nadal's has more flair to his shots, of course, but Medvedev is kind of a boring player. He's a big, powerful first serve player, hits long, flat ground strokes, but doesn't really wow you or impress you with his game. He kind of and I think Tsitsipas once said he plays a very boring style of tennis.
Tsitsipas might be a little salty. He doesn't have a good record. He has a very poor record against Medvedev.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the reality is that Medvedev, similar to Djokovic, they're both boring players to watch, but they both play extremely smart and outplay their opponent, playing high IQ tennis. But yeah, again, this match, what stands out from it is we'll probably talk about this later, is how much net play that was involved, and despite the big long ground stroke points, so it has its pros and cons. But in terms of the grand scheme of tennis, I think it's a great match to watch historically.
Yeah, it's funny. I asked the leading question. It's funny you said in retrospect, because at the time where I watched this match, I was really excited for Nadal and I was rooting for Nadal in this match.
Yeah,
I did find it a little bit tedious when I watched it live.
Yeah,
and part of it was the nerves, because as Nadal kept getting close to the finish line, not getting there, it was just like, man, this guy just will not go away. Felt like every time Nadal would shut the door, and we'll get into a little bit why that happens with them. They have a very weird match history, including this match, right? Take out that first match they played. Their match history is basically a series of matches where the momentum swings are all over the place. This was a match Nadal was up 2 sets in a break, and he almost ends up losing it.
Yeah.
Australia this year, Medvedev's up 2 sets to love 40 at Nadal's serve, and he does end up losing it, but Nadal serves her in the 5th and can't serve it out. They played a match at the Masters. They played 2 matches at the ATP Masters finals. The first year, Medvedev's up 5-1 in the 5th and somehow loses the match. The second year, Nadal serves for the match in the second, and he somehow loses the match. And I think part of it, it's not that these guys are chokers, right? Part of it is these guys are also both very mentally tough, right? They're not going to give up in a match if they're done. But like you said, stylistically, and now let's get into styles a little bit. Stylistically, they play similar in a certain way. They're both counterpunchers. They both stand really far back to return, which means they get themselves in the point. And neither of them is like a net attacker. Nadal made himself a net attacker in this match, and so did Medvedev to an extent. These courts seem to be playing really slow,
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the things. Part of it is they're fast. I do think the courts of the U.S. Open were playing slow in the last couple of years. They're supposed to be faster this year. But the same sort of match happened in Australia, right? I think part of it is these guys are just really good at tracking down balls. When you talk about strengths and weaknesses, like what are Nadal's strengths? Like some of them are obvious. His strengths are his forehand is great. He can take it either way. He's lefty, so he's hitting to your backhand. And his strength is, again, sort of the ability to read the point, know when to come in. He backs up his serve very well, and he gets a lot of returns back in play, even though he's not an aggressive return. What are Nadal's weaknesses? It's hard to say there are weaknesses for an all-time great player, but he has weaknesses, right? I think his weaknesses is if you pull him out wide, right? The key Djokovic figured out to beating him is not hitting through him like Berdych used to try to do. That's not the answer. The answer is to angle him off the court and to get him angled out, get him stretched wide where he only has one hand on the backhand, where he's reaching out and slicing a lot of those balls like they're floating back, and you either attack them or you take them in the air and you come in. And his other weakness is he's not a tremendous server. He is not somebody who's going to just serve bot his way up a break in the fifth. It may be a struggle for him to close things out because he doesn't get the free points. What about Medvedev? His strength is I get all these returns back in play. I get to every ball. I hit very flat, so I'm hit very differently than everyone else. And I basically outfox you. I'm not going to overpower you. And I get a crap load of free points on my serve, right? And so in a weird way, there's strengths and weaknesses, and then his weaknesses, which I think define this match. And one thing from this match, it's how Nadal figured out how to manipulate Medvedev's weaknesses when I do think Nadal was struggling a little bit physically in this match at some point.
Yeah.
And Medvedev's weakness, his biggest weakness, is he's not a natural attacker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Bilal, for me, if I compare it to another sort of matchup that Nadal has had in his career with a significant player, I think a little bit about Andy Murray. I think Andy Murray was a better attacker and a better volleyer and had more variety than Medvedev. But Murray's record against Nadal was not awesome at the slam level. And part of the problem is, look, not many people have good slam records against Rafa Nadal. Murray and Djokovic can already play similarly. What's the difference there? Djokovic takes time away from Nadal. He takes it early. He can attack off both wings, and he knows he can't let Nadal just sit back there and dictate and make every mid-court ball into a forehand. And Murray was not able to take time away from him consistently. Medvedev in this match didn't even seem like he was motivated to at times. He was floating back balls back into the court. Nadal is getting forehand after forehand after forehand. And I think it's really tough. Medvedev is now 1-6 against Nadal as of this year after losing him in Australia and Acapulco. And I think this matchup is really hard for him because number one, he doesn't keep the ball away from the Nadal forehand enough. And number two, he can't finish those floating balls Nadal gives him in the middle of the court with the same efficiency. He was decent. He was actually really good at net, I thought, in this match when he did come in. Very weird looking, but herky-jerky, but he made it work. But a lot of these points that are going long, he's like stopping in no man's land and running back to the baseline because he doesn't want to come in. And those points should have been over. And you can argue his strategy may have worn Nadal out more, but in the end, this match is not in Medvedev's racket the way he's playing. And that head-to-head is not going to flip until either Nadal just ages out and just can't dictate the same way, or until Medvedev switches up and is able to close some of these points. But I don't know what you think below.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if you look at Australia, I mean, I'm not trying to detract from this match at all, but I feel like had that match gone in Medvedev's favor, maybe the argument could be made a little bit differently. But that being said, I do feel like the hesitation I think you said it best when you said that there was a lack of, he doesn't take away time from Nadal. He doesn't take the ball early from Nadal. That's what cost him those first two sets. He was standing too far back, and I know we're not trying to get into analysis too much, but he just kind of hangs on. He just hangs into the point, doesn't really do much, gives Nadal time to develop his rhythm even though Nadal is tight. And that, I think, allowed Nadal to kind of gain more momentum early on in the match. But for Medvedev to change the matchup at this point going forward, and interestingly, if they play later on this season, I think he's going to have to, stand closer up, number one, and then also start being aggressive from the beginning of the match.
Yeah, I made a note. Is Nadal tight, or is it just really humid? Because he seemed off, Arjun, even from the beginning of the match. He missed some easy balls. He got broken, missing a terrible forehand like in the bottom, that which never happens on his forehand wing. I thought, he won this tournament. It's hard to argue, and it was an epic win. I remember watching the Schwartzman match and the Berrettini match. he was struggling at times in those matches. I couldn't get a finger on it, whether it was just Djokovic was out and he felt the pressure, Federer and Djokovic gone, chance to add and get closer to Roger, or it was just the humidity. The US Open is supposed to be sort of very difficult to play in those conditions inside. And that's relevant, right, for this year. If he's already struggling with humidity 3 years ago, it's a hot year this year. It's going to be humid. It's going to be difficult. And this was a long match, but he seemed to be struggling a bit physically. It's not going to be like Australia where the temperatures cooled off in the middle of the night a little bit and let him sort of get his bearings. So I think that may be an issue if he's looking to win the US Open this year.
Yeah, I think I had, regarding his stamina, he played most of his matches, plus a walkover earlier in the tournament, were 3 sets. He had that tough 4-setter against Cilic and so a couple tough 3-setters, but this was really the first match and only match in the finals where he was threatened, and because of that, also like both strategically against Medvedev's game and also to save stamina again and his energy against Medvedev, he was coming to the net a lot more. He was capitalizing on Medvedev standing way far back and on his serves and serving and volleying a lot, and even during points coming in a lot. And he was playing smart, not because he knew he was playing smart with his serves. His serves itself isn't big, but statistically, most people win a lot more points when they make their first serve in. And just across the board, I have a couple stats which I was excited about when I read them. He was serving at such a high percentage, 80% in the first set, 74% in the second set, 75, 74, and then in the fifth set, 84%.
But how much do you think that is because he doesn't feel like Medvedev's court positioning threatens him, so he doesn't need to go for a lot on the first serve?
Yeah, no, that's probably a good point, and giving himself maybe a little more time to come in off the first serve to the net. But I mean, comparatively, the other two, like Medvedev, on the other hand, not playing his first serve as great as he should have, ranging in the 60s, 50s, 55% in the fifth set. Maybe showing a little fatigue, but yeah, I think Nadal, given the tournament, his stamina, he was a little off throughout the match and throughout the previous matches as well, but he was still at the same, like mentally he was there and playing high percentage, high IQ tennis at the same time. Given what you said with Medvedev or Nadal being tight, potentially, given maybe he had some pressure on him, but usually he plays a little loose. I'm not sure. Maybe he was feeling that pressure to come up and tie Federer for finally. I don't know. It's hard to say whether he was feeling the pressure or Medvedev just raising his game and changing up his strategy, which is credit to him. Finally, not finally, but giving someone like Nadal a big challenge and changing the strategy. Like one thing I always talk about is adapting to the game and to the moment. And yeah, Medvedev did that beautifully in this match, and shows that future champions is something that they all have.
Most guys, I mean, most guys who are down 2 sets in a break in their first major final, they go away, and that's kind of normalized.
Yeah,
very few people are going to come back and make the push he did. He played really well. He made a lot of big, and look, they had long, grueling games like Bilal. This was not just like hold it, love, hold it, love, hold it. There's a lot of deuces, a lot of big 30 alls, 40 all. I had a couple of notes just about final sort of things I was watching. I thought Arjun was referencing the high serve percentage. Nadal was really just sliding his serve. He wasn't going for a lot of flat big serves. I think he was, again, knew he had time. He never felt rushed. So he was just slicing in, especially the ad court. Won a lot of big points, both in this match and in Australia, just sliding that ball, his favorite serve, out to the backhand. Medvedev didn't attack it much. The one time he really did was that set point in the fourth set that he hit a brilliant backhand on. Otherwise, that's Nadal, again, in his comfort zone. You're not taking him out of his comfort zone. I don't think Medvedev used the forehand down the line enough in this match. I think he got into a lot of Nadal slice, forehand cross court, Nadal slice, forehand cross court, and eventually Nadal working it back to his forehand. But I also think that's one of his weaknesses. He's not a great attacker off the forehand wing. And then again, this goes back to Medvedev and short balls. Nadal slice not being punished. Nadal taking the net. Nadal really utilizing the court in kind of the Z axis, forward and backward, not just side to side. And I think in the end, I don't know how much of it's like Arjun said, it's so hard to tell if Nadal dropped and Medvedev rose. I just think the margins are really slim between these guys because they start every point basically from neutral. So I think that's why you look at that weird match history. I mean, if Nadal loses this match, this is a worse choke in a way than people are giving Medvedev crap because he was up 2 sets and loved 40 in the third and didn't win.
Yeah.
But if Nadal loses this match,
it would be
it's worse. He was actually had the break and he had an overhead at deuce and that would have given him, or overhead for a break at 4-all in the third that would have broken. He was served for the match there, missed the overhead. Yeah. I just think this is a really taxing matchup for both of them. I think physically it demands a lot. But again, the thing I go back to is when I think about this year, and we kind of end with that, like, what do we learn about this match, about this year? I think if the courts are playing, if Nadal's stamina holds up, I don't think this is an uncomfortable matchup for him. And I think it's really dangerous to play a guy like Nadal and have him not feel uncomfortable and have the match kind of be on his racket. If you kind of look at his big losses in major events, it's rare that he's the one dictating and he loses. That's like the death knell. And so I just wonder, can Medvedev switch that dynamic? Does he have that ability, right? Or is he just a guy who's sort of maxed out? And look, he's just not naturally a volleyer or a forecourt player. And so asking him to do those things is actually going to be to his detriment.
I think it's going to be interesting this year. Exactly what you said. Can his stamina hold up? Can his body hold up throughout the tournament? And if they can, I think he's heavily the favorite with Medvedev coming in second. The big contention point would be what's his strategy throughout the tournament going to be? Is it going to be his usual grind from the baseline, behind the baseline tennis, or is he going to come in a lot more kind of like this match, serve bigger? We never know because he changes his strategy actually.
Nadal is the ultimate by any means necessary guy. I mean, this is a classic Bilal, for your point. I mean, this is like, he basically looked at this match at some point and was like, my best chance is just to get forward as soon as I can. Yeah. Because I'm not afraid of this guy's passing shots and I can take a lot of these balls out of the air. I mean, Bilal, like, if they play again, do you view it as Nadal heavy favorite, slight favorite, even odds? Like,
I give it even odds, but I think with Nadal, Nadal has learned from these last 2 matches. Number one, also just given the limitation he probably has physically, for him to last a duration of a possible 5-setter with Medvedev, which seems to be the pattern now. I think he would need to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of stepping in early and ending points at the net, which he has shown that he is willing to do and comfortable doing. He is one of the best volleyers in the game and underrated probably his whole career. So I think going forward, I think he would not try to outlast Medvedev in long rallies. I think that strategy has not been fruitful for him the past few matchups. And I think it would be more beneficial for Nadal and more effective and efficient for him to start ending those points closer up to net and going with probably less than 5-shot rally ending on average.
Yeah. The interesting thing is the match goes long, though. Medvedev was 0-4 entering this match in 5-set matches, ended up losing this. He started 0-6. He loses to Wawrinka the next year at Australian Open. He's 3-8 now. He's not an awesome 5th-set player. And he looked kind of physically toast himself. It's weird because it's kind of the opposite of Australia in a way, Bilal, because I felt like US Open, you watch this match, Nadal is the older player. He looks to be the one struggling towards the end. They have this epic point. He's serving the match at 5-2. And they have this ridiculous point where he's doing these half volley pickups, full stretch. And then the crowd's going crazy. And I don't think anyone realized, I think Nadal either hurt something or he was just toast at that point. He was like on one knee, like not able to stand up straight. And I was like, I remember watching it live. I'm like, that's not a good sign. And then he immediately gets broken. And then you're like, maybe he can't finish this match. Like that point might have broken him. But that felt in Australia, Medvedev hung in there and he's a gamer, but it felt like he was a little physically compromised towards the end of that match. Like he just wasn't moving great to his left, to his backhand side. And Nadal like didn't look physically bad at all at the end of that match. He looks fine. Yeah. So maybe it's a day in thing. Maybe some days Nadal feels good and maybe some days he feels bad and maybe it's a weather thing. And I just don't know what to know if it goes to 5th. I've got a guy on one hand who has won a bunch of 5-setters in his career. And I've got a guy in Daniil Medvedev who has won 3 5-set matches in his career. He beat Marin Cilic at Wimbledon. He beat Filip Krajinovic at the US Open, Australia, and he beat Felix in Australia. None of those is this, none of those is the same as being Nadal or Djokovic in a 5-set match.
Yeah, that stat definitely stands out to me now. I mean, honestly, if I have to give odds over under 50%, if they go to a 5-set this year, this US Open, in the semis or in the final, I would probably have to give it to Nadal just based off of the inexperience. I think that mentally there's a big component to this matchup too, if we think about it. And I think Medvedev at the Australian Open this year, I think, yes, he was fatigued, but I think also the crowd being against him really mentally kind of disturbed him. So, yeah.
Final quick. Oh, go ahead.
All right, no, I was gonna say the opposite of Bilal. Just he doesn't have that experience, but now he's had 3 and has had a lot of grueling finals now, Medvedev. So I think he's ready for these moments, and he's won a slam too. So he has that not veteran experience, but does have that championship level experience.
Yeah.
That at those big moments, it's not like he's really choked in any moments. It's really players have really beaten him in those big moments, but he has a couple of wins under his belt there. I think in 5 sets, I think versus Nadal, I don't think Nadal's body can handle that anymore unless it's
man, but we said the same thing.
We say that every
7 months ago. I mean, like.
Well, now he has that ab injury. He has the rib injury recently. He has that
I just think if it's a single match, he could have one foot in a cast, and he will literally die on the court. I don't think it's healthy. And Bilal's laughing because he knows it's true. This guy, if it's a single match and he's got to win it, he will take every known anesthetic in the world to go out there and play. Yeah. Because he literally will play that match saying, this is the last match of my career.
All right.
Agreed.
The reason I couldn't stop myself, I come back to this point. We talked about this. We talked about Djokovic at 40-15 and tendencies and how do people choke? Yes. Sometimes people just choke. Sometimes people miss their go-to shot, and that's choking in my mind. It's underperforming. But a lot of times, these guys at the best, I don't think Medvedev is a tight or choking player. But I think his 5-set match record indicates 2 things. I don't think his stamina is the best. I don't think it's a problem, but I don't think it's as good as some other guys who are uber fit on tour. And maybe it's his game style, and at 6'6", it's hard to sustain the game style he plays. But I don't view him as like one of the warriors on tour where he could go 6 hours and be fine at the end. But I think the second problem is he does have weaknesses to his game. And I think they came out. Like, look at the key points in this match or Australia, right? When push came to shove, Medvedev got broken in Australia the final time because he missed an attacking forehand, because that's not his game. That's not his comfort zone. And when push came to shove in this match, he had a chance to break Nadal back. He got in, he was trying to take a hanging backhand volley, and he let it go, hoping it would go out, and dropped in. Because again, that's not his strength. That's not his game. And part of the reason Nadal and Djokovic and Federer were able to sustain success is they kept adding things to their game so that fewer and fewer dimensions they were uncomfortable with, right? They can take care of these things under pressure because it's second nature to them. What does Nadal do when he's under pressure now? He comes in. He serves and volleys a lot. He does half volleys. That's what he did down the stretch. He hit the serve up the tee after going out wide the whole match to win the match. Yeah. And for me, again, I come back to it. Yeah, Nadal could physically fall apart and blow it because he's missing aggressive attacking shots. I don't think you rip away a trophy from Rafa Nadal waiting for him to make mistakes. And for me, that's what I come down to. If Medvedev serves out of his mind like he did last year, then sure, he could beat Nadal, and he can roll anyone when he serves well and he returns well. He can beat anyone. He's great. But if it's a tight match, which I would imagine it would be, it's just really hard in a single match scenario for me to pick him to beat Nadal, because I just don't think, if you look at the matches Medvedev has lost at that level, he's been lights out on hard courts the last few years. But the guys who beat him simply hit him off the court. Djokovic in Paris last year, he came forward, he took away time, he won that match. Zverev at the ATP finals, hit him off the court. Team at the US Open 2020. Medvedev should have been the heavy favorite, right? Nadal wasn't there. Djokovic was, why did Medvedev lose? He got blown off the court by Team in 3 sets. Yeah. So for me, it's like, I do think there's an ultimate ceiling on Medvedev's game by being simply the counterpuncher and not having the ability to put away some of these balls. I don't think he still has the ability. He still hits like these weird, I'm running forward, I'm gonna hit this weird, they even called it like a junior player shot in this match. He dinked the little dink, like, and he gets away with it a lot because he's very skilled and he's got great reflexes and he's very quick up there. But those are not good habits if you're trying to win pressure points. Like, that's not the way to beat. You're not going to beat these guys with that sort of play up front with two-handed backhand volleys and these weird sort of like approach shots. And again, even the point he got broken in the fifth, he hates that low slice, that nothing slice. We were watching your brother's college teammate, Rinky Hijikata, last night. Yeah. Rinky hung in that match. A lot of it was just nothing slices, just keep hitting nothing slices. Medvedev hated it. He doesn't know what to do with it. And so I just wonder, obviously, if they play, could he win? Absolutely, he could win. But I would not say it's the most likely result. Similar to Bilal's skepticism about Berrettini and Nadal, you know, because of that, when it comes down to it in those matchups, Nadal has a place he can go that he's safe. And I think in this matchup, you look at every big point, Nadal was hyper aggressive on the big points. And Medvedev, to his credit, saved a lot of points in this match being very aggressive. He's a great mental player. He's super clutch. I don't take any of that away from him. But I do think he sort of has maxed out what he can be. And I think that his ceiling is not as high as Nadal's ceiling. It's not as high as Djokovic's ceiling. It's not as high even as Zverev's ceiling if he's healthy and playing well. Yeah, probably not higher than Alcaraz. And probably, we haven't seen this matchup yet. We'll talk about Jannik Sinner later after the hardcourt season. Probably not as high as Jannik Sinner's ceiling is going to be once he finally gets done. Because in the end, if you have a guy who can attack and blow you off the court, it doesn't matter how many balls you get back in play, especially when you aren't a great, like, serve, get a weak reply, and take care of a lot of short balls player. And he just doesn't do that well enough for a guy who serves as well as he does. Wait, long soliloquy. I don't know if you have any thoughts below.
Yeah, no, I think everything you said is on point, especially with Medvedev being blown out off the court with a lot of players. To his credit, he did change his game in the sets 3 and 4, which a lot of players can't do and won't do, and it kind of just almost give up when you're down 2 sets against a legendary player. But so he has a fight. He has that mental monstrosity in him. And so he'll against Nadal, though. Yeah, I agree. Nadal will find a way to win and change his game 10 times more than Medvedev would. Yeah, everything you said, I agree. Bilal.
Yeah, I just
close this up. Anything?
I think just one interesting follow-up thought would be just to compare Medvedev's performance against Novak Djokovic in their U.S. Open final will be a good match to think about in terms of what he did differently in that match compared to this one. So I think that's a good one.
Well, we didn't cover that in this one, but I thought Djokovic was really flat in that match. Yeah. And I don't think he got a lot of, I think Medvedev's first serve percentage a little bit higher than this match, which helps, gets more free points. But I think Djokovic, when he's flat, is a worse returner than Nadal standing by the back of the wall, getting every return back against Medvedev. Because Medvedev's not good at putting away these loopy high returns, really. Yeah. So
it was almost like this year's Wimbledon final or the matches that Djokovic played when the first set against a Casper, not a Casper Ruud. Who did he play in the finals of Wimbledon?
Kyrgios.
Kyrgios. Like the first set, he was kind of passive, waiting for Kyrgios to make the errors. But Kyrgios blew him off the court. But then second, third set, he was almost in a way just playing his baseline like passive game. Yeah. And then the other players couldn't keep up their level. But then this match, he was waiting for, or in the U.S. Open last year, he was waiting for Medvedev to drop his level, but Medvedev never actually dropped his level.
I also think the matchup is different, and it reflects in the head-to-head. Djokovic is 4-6 against Medvedev. But he's lost the most recent matches. Medvedev's had the edge. Yeah. I mean, Djokovic is 6-4. Excuse me. He wins that head to head, but Medvedev's flipped that. Nadal is 6-1 against Medvedev, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I think Nadal is a better attacking player when you allow him to attack than Djokovic in a lot of ways. Djokovic is also a counterpuncher. Medvedev doesn't give you anything. So for Djokovic to win that match, he's got to go outside of his comfort zone. I go back to Nadal would be perfectly happy if you just let him hit forehands the whole match. He's going to stand there and just hit forehand after forehand after forehand. And this was not even a great forehand day for him. If it had been a great forehand day, I think he wins this match in straight sets. So I just wonder, it'll be curious. I think he's going to be super loose, though. He looked really loose at Wimbledon for the most part. He didn't look tight.
Yeah.
And he looked pretty loose at the French Open. I wonder if it's mentally, he's kind of playing with house money at this point.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to think about him, right? We never really saw any of the big three loosey-goosey with no pressure on them. We saw Federer, I think, 2017 Wimbledon, 2018 Aussie, after he came back and won Aussie. He was a little bit loose in those tournaments and he's kind of rolling. But I think 2019 Wimbledon, he felt the pressure. Nadal felt the pressure, I think, up until he passed Federer.
Yeah.
And I think winning the Australian Open this year and passing him, I think after that, I don't see any signs of tension from him this year. I feel like if he loses, it's because he's not playing well. But
we know that Nadal wants that title of the plaque on the wall with the most Grand Slam titles, but with Djokovic finally coming closer, I wonder, will he get a little tight and show signs of tightness this U.S. Open? It'll be interesting to watch.
I don't know. I think even when he gets tight, he's better than 99.9% of the tour. So it's like kind of a moot point. Cool, guys. Well, thank you for doing this with us. We ran a little over, but a good match to talk about. I think the next time we come back, we should cover, maybe we'll come back after Canada, after Cincinnati, and then we'll talk about those two Masters, get into the U.S. Open draw. We'll have a lot more information. Is Zverev playing? Did the U.S. change their vaccine laws? Probably not, but it'll give us some idea of where the seeds fall. And great to see you both.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye.